All right, Shalom. Let me get straight into this lesson. Got a lot to get to. First off, I want to set the backdrop. Salakia, about showing you this 17th century painting of Peter and Paul. Now we're gonna deal with what the New Testament is really talking about. I'm gonna get into some heavy information, but I want you to have this visual in your mind before they start whitewashing the images. So let's get into this lesson. So you've been taught the Bible is for anybody. No, the whole Bible is for the Israelites. But I'm going to prove this to you. I'm going to get all into the so-called New Testament, and we're going to get deep into this lesson. All right. First off, they start off in First Peter, chapter 1 and 1. It says, Peter, an apostle of Yahweh Mashiach, right, to the strangers scattered throughout Pontus, Galatia, Cappadocia, Asia, and Bithynia. I want you to remember this, right? So Peter, an apostle of Yahweh Mashiach, to the strangers scattered. So who is Peter, Paul, all the apostles, and so on and so forth? Who are they talking to? Who is they dealing with? Who is these books written to? I'm going to show you. It says this letter, let's go back. We got to use some kind of simple literature understanding. Peter, an apostle of Yahweh Mashiach, to the strangers. So he's writing this letter to the strangers throughout Pontus, Galatia, Cappadocia, Asia, and Bithynia. It says, too, elect according to knowledge. Who is the elect? The Israelites. So let's get all into this. Let's go to this word strangers. This is who these books, this is who these epistles are for. It says scattered. It says a scattering, dispersion. It says, number one, of Israelites dispersed among foreign nations that were called Gentiles. It says, two, of the Christians scattered abroad among the Gentiles. So you got this word Gentile is a stumbling block, right? Going to the book of Ephesians chapter 2, I think that's 11, that these Israelites had lost their identity. They lost their way. They was associating themselves with bywords back then, and the same thing happened again today, which means they was calling themselves Romans, they was calling themselves Greeks, so on and so forth. They wouldn't associate themselves with being Israelites because a lot of them fell away. Now, let's get more into this. So I wanted to establish that point, right? So Peter, an apostle of Yahweh Mashiach, to the strangers, which we know that means Israelites, strangers. Matter of fact, let's go here. Salakia. To the strangers. So that word scatter means diaspora. Right here. It says scattered. One who comes a foreign country into a city or land and to reside there by the side of native, a stranger. Right? So these are Israelites that were scattered, but I'm going to prove this by backing it up with a precept. Acts 2 and 9. Matter of fact, let's go to the context. Let's just read the whole thing. Acts chapter 2 and 1. It says, and when the day of Pentecost, I'm going to get into that Pentecost so you can understand what that means. That was one of the three main holy days that the Israelites had to return to Jerusalem to keep. Was fully come. They were all in one accord in one place. It says too, and suddenly, right, there came a sound from heaven as of a rushing mighty wind, and it filled all the house where they were sitting. 2 and 3. It says, and there appeared unto them cloven tongues like as of fire, and it sat upon each of them, and they were all filled with the Holy Spirit, and began to speak with other tongues as the Spirit gave them utterance. And they weren't speaking in no gibberish; they were speaking in different languages, and they was hearing. Like I said, I don't even want to go into that because I'm gonna stay on the subject. Acts 2 and 5, and there were dwelling at Jerusalem Jews. These were Israelites. They was dwelling at they came to Jerusalem to keep the high holy day, right, which is the Pentecost, which is the Feast of Weeks, if I'm not mistaken, but I'm gonna get into that. I think it's the Feast of Weeks. Devout men out of every nation under heaven. So let's go here real quick. What does this really mean? Acts 2 and 5. Let me go to a different version on that so you can get it. Salakia. Give me 1 second. I think I got it. Right here at the top. I didn't even have to. Salakia. Okay, at the top. It says, now there were Jews residing in Jerusalem, devout men from every part of the world. So let's go back here. So these were Israelites that came to Jerusalem for the feast for Pentecost, which is the Feast of Weeks, if I'm not mistaken. I'll verify that. It says 5. Now there were dwelling there Jerusalem Jews, devout men out of every other nation under heaven, which we know that's from all over the world. That's what that means, because they were scattered. Acts 2 and 6. Now when this was noised abroad, the multitude came together and were confounded, because that every man heard them speak in his own language. Do you hear what they're saying? So let's keep going. It says 2 and 7, and they were all amazed and marveled, saying one to another, behold, are not all these which speak Galileans? It says right here, Acts 2 and 8. It says, and how hear we every man in our own tongue, wherein we was born, because the Israelites were scattered all over. They spoke different languages. All right, what were they scattered to? Let's go to 2 and 9. The Parthians and Medes, the Elamites, and the dwellers of Mesopotamia, and in Judea, and Cappadocia, and Pontus, and Asia. It says Pygaria, Pamphylia, and in Egypt, and the parts of Libya, and Cyrene, and the strangers of Rome, Israelites in Rome, Jews and proselytes. So the Israelites that came for, let me show you why they came there. This Deuteronomy 16 and 16, there was a commandment for us. It says, 3 times a year shall all thy males appear before Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushua, thy power, in the place which he shall choose. It says, is the feast of unleavened bread. It says, and the feast of weeks, which is Pentecost. It says, and in the feast of the tabernacles, and they should not appear before the Lord empty. So yeah, there is a requirement that all the Israelites, so-called Jews, will have to come to Jerusalem 3 times a year for the high holy days. So this would, when you go here, 1 Peter, Salakia, it says 1 Peter 1 and 1, Peter, apostle of Yahushua HaMashiach, to the strangers scattered throughout Pontus, Galatia, Cappadocia, Asia, and Bithynia. So we know these were Israelites. When we go back here, right, we know the Israelites came, the so-called Jews came for the Pentecost. They was gathered on one accord from all over the known world. So this is going to make everything else make sense. Let's keep going. So Acts, Salakia. Matter of fact, let's go to this word Pentecost. I'm going to show you that, prove that first, that's talking about the Feast of Weeks. It says Pentecost. It says the 50th day. It says the second of 3 great Jewish, which is supposed to be Israelite feasts, celebrated at Jerusalem yearly, the seventh week after the Passover, in a grateful recognition of the completed harvest, the Feast of Weeks. You know? So that's Pentecost. So going back here, we know that the book of Peter, you know, and all the other books was addressed to the Israelites that were scattered. And we went here, Pontus, Galatia. So when you go to Acts 2 and 9, Salakia, 2 and 9, let me go back. Give me 1 second. So the 2 and 9, the Parthians, and the Medes, the Elamites, and the dwellers of Mesopotamia, and in Judea, and Cappadocia, and in Pontus, and Asia, where this came from. Peter, apostle of Yahushua HaMashiach, to the strangers scattered throughout Pontus, Galatia, And that's how you got the book of Galatians. It was writing to the Israelites that was in Galatia, Cappadocia, Asia, Bithynia. So these were places in so-called Asia, Asia Minor, however you want to say it, that the Israelites were scattered to. Let's go here. It says James 1:1. James, a servant of Yahweh Shah Hamashiach, to the 12 tribes which are scattered abroad. The 12 tribes of Israel, they were scattered. Greeting. That's who the book of James. It goes on and on. So this wasn't just no Christian church. This wasn't no random people that this was dealing with. It was dealing with Israelites. Let's go to the book of Galatians. So we know Israelites was in Galatia. It says, Paul, an apostle, not of men, neither by men, but by Yahweh Shah Mashiach and power, thy Father, who raised him from the dead. It says, and all the brethren, these are Israelites, which are with me unto the churches of Galatia. So let's go to this word churches. Let's prove something. Because you just know the word church and what you've been taught the word means in the modern sense of it. Let's go here. And I went to this before, but it's new people waking up. Check this out. It says churches. Number 2, assembly of the Israelites. Assembly of the Israelites. So that's who the book of Galatians was written to. It is one written to your Christian church in a modern sense of it. That's the problem with you people. You don't know history. And that's why they can continue to lie to you. Now, if you sincerely just didn't know this because you're learning, you're going to learn today. Matter of fact, let's go here. Give me 1 second. 1 second. Let me prove something. All right. So this was an Israelite custom. It says at the top, yes, Pentecost and the Feast of Weeks are the same holiday, which holy day, though they are known by different names. It says Pentecost is a Greek word for 50th day and was used by Greek-speaking Jews. Then go to show you it was Israelites that had been Hellenized, that was calling themselves Greeks, and you had some of them that knew they was Israelites that took on the Greek customs to refer to the Feast of Weeks. Going back into Deuteronomy, why? That's why Israelites was there, because it was a commandment in our law that they had to return 3 times a year. Deuteronomy 16:16. So ain't no heathens coming to this. 3 times a year shall all thy males appear before Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shah in the place which he shall choose, in the feast of unleavened bread, and in the feast of weeks, aka Pentecost, and in the feast of the tabernacles, and they should not appear before the Lord empty. So going back to make all this make sense, these were all Israelites coming from these different places that they were scattered to. And it's proven right here that this is what it's saying. And we went to the word scattering. Matter of fact, let's do it again for people that don't understand it. I'm going to jump to Revelation. Right? So reading this, Peter, apostle of Yahweh Shah Mashiach, to the strangers scattered throughout Pontus, Galatia, the book of Galatians, Cappadocia, Asia, and Bithynia. Let's go to this word scattered again, diaspora. That's the same word that's used in James chapter 1:1. It says of Israelites dispersed among foreign nations. Man, that's a cold cut to you Christians. You people on the low level that's outside of this truth. Let's go here. Revelations 1:11. It says, saying I'm the Alpha and Omega, the first and the last, which thou seest is Yahweh Shai. Right in a book, it sent it to the 7 churches which are in Asia, which we know the word churches mean the assembly of the Israelites, which are in Asia, unto Ephesus. It's like you got the book of Ephesians, that was the Israelites that was there, unto Samaria, unto Pergamos, the Israelites was there, unto Tyre, and unto Sardis, and unto Philadelphia, and unto Laodicea. Sorry about them names. These are all Israelites scattered among in these places. And they had sanctuaries, all right, like kind of how we have today. You got brethren scattered throughout the whole world, but we gathered through one spirit. So the whole Bible and the New Testament was only dealing with the Israelites. Nothing never changed. And the word Gentile can be applied to Israelites, and it can be applied to heathen. It depends on the context, but you haven't been taught this. Hopefully this lesson was edifying. Call Halal Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rachak, Kodash. Shalom.